Hi everybody, it's Teresa again, and I really liked doing the video in PowerPoint, so I decided to do that again for Module 5, Media Literacy, Digital Portfolios, and Curriculum Maps. So, first thing we were asked to respond to essentially was some of the media literacy and portfolios and curriculum maps was school culture. How does this influence school culture? So I thought it was important to kind of identify or define what school culture is. So essentially it's kind of like a shared set of beliefs, values, and assumptions amongst the staff, the students, that particular area. And so I just wanted everyone to keep that in mind as I continue on. So the first thing that we look at is media literacy. So I thought it is important individually to look at the definitions of those words. Media being the main means of mass communication, according to Oxford Dictionary, so broadcast, publishing, internet, still books, anything that is considered media. And then literacy is the ability to read and write, or competence or knowledge in that area. So I think what we're focusing on here is competency and knowledge in media specifically. So this ties back to my interview with my curriculum expert, my mentor teacher, who really was, we were talking about what we need out of students as far as technology or the internet is them to decipher fact from fiction. And this got brought up in my professional development yesterday as well, several times from multiple departments. So this is not just to the English and history people. This is to science, this is to math, this is to everything. I thought the text made some really interesting points too on how students basically need to understand like the things they wear or the things they're into. They are walking billboards essentially. They're doing exactly kind of what the media wants them to do to push their product or way of thinking out in their culture, in their school culture in this instance. I found a really good TEDx video from a lady who was describing media literacy and critical thinking, and more so the ability for students to look at a piece of media and deconstruct it essentially. And I thought that was a really good point of what we want our students to do. We want them to look at something and break it down for what it's worth or what it's not worth. So in today's society, essentially, or in American culture at the moment, I think with COVID more than ever, we've seen that this is not just a want of education, but that this media literacy competency is a need. We need students to have this skill. That same video, the speaker, she mentioned how our students spend at least 7.5 hours a day exposed to media of some type. And that was in 2013. So I have a feeling that is up more so than ever, particularly with all the technology pieces we've incorporated in this school year. So the thing she also mentioned, and I totally agree with, is that if we bring media literacy into the classroom, it's really great connection engagement for students to see school connected to real life. Again, those brands they might be wearing, or the TikTok, or whatever they're doing on their phones. Lots of ways to connect media and how to understand media to their real life. So moving on, the lesson idea I had really still applies to COVID. In science, we teach how to draw graphs, read graphs, interpret graphs, and understand them. Media currently has been using a lot of diagrams and graphs, particularly with COVID. So I think it would be great that students utilize media literacy skills in breaking down the graph and looking at the value and purpose of it. One resource that I found, I'll show you here shortly, basically gave these points, at least on graphs, making sure you're checking the axes and legends, values, and scales. So I'm going to take you to those sites really quickly. So here, the author goes over what COVID-19 graphs are and aren't telling us. So it's important that students be able to look at these graphs and determine if the graph is really valid or not. And if it is valid, what is it saying? And graphs are used, in science, but they're just put out there for a multitude of things. And I think that's super important part of curriculum that we can incorporate media literacy into, not just science, but other areas as well. I thought an example that I came across of a really bad graph, particularly with COVID, was this one here. And we'll see if my computer can load. Sorry, guys. Okay, so this graph has loaded, and you can see there's just like so many words all over the place. We've got these curved lines, kind of these spikes, dates, the legends on the scale. I mean, they go from 0 into the negatives, and it's just a really, I think, bad example of a graph, but somebody could look at it and think like that it's, I don't know, a really valid one for some reason. So we want our students to definitely distinguish that this is not particularly useful or valid graph of anything, at least relating to COVID in current times. So I just wanted to display that. And then, sorry, let me get back on. That was my idea there. As far as e-portfolios go, we actually spent yesterday, Monday, in professional development again, talking about this between departments at my high school and the Kansas STAR program, the individual plan of study, and kind of going through that and deciding what our departments needed to align with those individual plans of study, which is essentially Kansas' version of the e-portfolio. I thought this was a great quote from one of my resources, that e-portfolios provide both students and faculty the ability to learn about outcomes over time, connections in curriculum, insights, allows for improvement, identity to be developed amongst the learner or the faculty or facilitator. So I think what e-portfolios bring to the school culture is that they're authentic to the student, they're reflective to the student and the teacher, and they're connective to the student's interest or the teacher's interest. So I just wanted to bring that, and let me bring my thing down here just a little bit. During my time in high school, we did actually kind of more of a paper version of this, and that was something we did in my English junior year class, and I would say we called it essentially the business English unit, but putting together like a normal portfolio, resume, etc. Now that everything's so digital, I think that Google Sites, based on kind of the research and how much schools are using Google, would be a great way to do that, and Dr. Anderson had put in a great link website to that as well. Zello is what my high school has been using. I would say it's more of a career centered kind of cruising thing. I'll show you it here. It allows students to take some quizzes and do some career matching, gives them their styles, personality, learning, skills they might have, allows for them to put courses they want and kind of make that plan, but it doesn't really have a place for their work. So besides just their Google Drive, I think that Google Sites was a great example and really something they can just continue to add on to throughout the course of their education. So I think as far as the school culture, e-portfolios help students to accomplish things, to recognize their ability, and put together something like sequentially, logically, and display themselves in an educated manner, which is just great for overall culture and personal education. Lastly, we have curriculum mapping. So back to my interview, my curriculum expert, Brad Klein, he's been a science teacher for 33 years. He has seen a lot of things. And so he mentioned that curriculum is how you approach things, how you deal with topics, and how you differentiate instruction. So I think if you can take that concept into curriculum mapping, you keep that in mind that you are aligning to standards, not a textbook. The example of the curriculum map I'm going to show you here in just a moment for my district was last done 10 years ago. So it is something they are hoping to update. However, they consequently want to update it with a new textbook adoption. So I found that kind of interesting. One of the links Dr. Anderson gave us mentioned that curriculum maps are not lesson plans. So just keeping that in mind, I think curriculum maps give a better perspective of places where cross-curricular moments can happen. And I really think that will influence or transform school culture even more if you can combine, like, say, science and English into a unit class for a couple weeks and just get even further into collaboration and that shared set of values and ideas across teachers and students. So it's not like English teacher does this and the science teacher does that, but really kind of that connectivity. So I'm going to flip to what my district has as a curriculum map here, or the 10-year-old version. So here you can see the curriculum map for physical science. What I'm teaching at the moment is laid out similar to the templates that we were given in this module. And we have all the essential questions, content, skills, assessments, lessons, technology, which is something that maybe isn't as quite applicable at the moment, and standards. So the standards are out of date. We no longer use these standards anymore. We use NGSS standards, which that was linked as well in our module. But I think overall it's got a lot of the key questions, but really curriculum maps need time. So we've all kind of made that point. In order to develop better curriculum, we need the time to put a map together, which essentially is providing some answers to these essential questions on how we're going to get students to what we want them to know. The one other thing that I wanted to note was that this does include lessons in more or less alignment to the textbook, which the textbook is a resource, but it's not necessarily what the curriculum map should be about. So lastly, what I have kind of as the big question would be, how straightforward are you in teaching media literacy? Do you explain directly to students like, hey, the point of this is I want you to gain skills at, deconstructing a piece of an infographic or something? Or are you just letting them pick it up as a soft skill? I'm sure a lot of that applies to the age group that you are teaching, but just wanted to see what methods everyone is using out there. And lastly, here are my references, should any of you want to go back and look at that. Hopefully this has been good for you guys and just a change up from writing a paper, but any questions, feel free to comment. Thanks, guys.